Hey there, friends and enemies, JoPa here again, and today I want to talk about the biggest scam in video game history the day before. This game went from the most wishlisted on Steam at one point to the developer's Fantastic being shut down less than a week after early access launch. So how did we get here? What can we do to avoid this situation in the future? And what can you do if you purchased the game on Steam already? Luckily, it is no longer available to buy on Steam thanks to the negative reviews and the developers no longer being around to support the game. You can also get a full refund regardless of how long you played the game, which I think is very good because of the rug pull nature of what the developers have done. And I'm going to talk about all of that in just a little bit. So, the timeline is kind of crazy. There was such a roller coaster with the day before. It had this teaser that was really well received. It looked fantastic, awesome cinematics, no gameplay, which is a warning in and of itself. But there was a lot of goodwill built just because the developer seemed open at the time. They were talking about the game quite a bit, and it seemed like this was the type of game everyone in the gaming community was thirsting for. An open world survival MMO, something like DayZ meets The Division with all these different features, and it sounded too good to be true and ultimately was. But you can't get too upset with people wanting a game like this, and hopefully this debacle leads to another developer seeing this and capitalizing on the opportunity, because I do think there is a major market for an open world survival MMO type of game, and the developer that does seize upon that opportunity will probably make an absolute killing, as we saw from all the wish lists of the day before. But the other issue that we saw really early on was lack of gameplay. We saw some cinematics, we saw some beautiful footage, but there just was never any gameplay despite approaching numerous launches and then ultimately seeing those launches delayed. It still felt weird that we just never saw any type of gameplay footage whatsoever until the very end of the road as we were approaching the final early access launch. That was a big issue, and I think something that sent up red flags from a lot of people. There was talk eventually, as the delays kept happening, of this game not existing ever. It just being a complete fabrication from the jump, which at this point it looks like that was the case. But despite all that, a lot of people were still hopeful that this game would eventually deliver on the promise that it had. And then the controversy happened with the copyright. They no longer owned the rights to the Day Before name. It got pulled from Steam entirely, and it seemed like at that point it was game over. We were never going to see this game actually hit shelves or hit the Steam market, whatever the case may be, and it was just dead in the water. However, after a few months, we did get an update that the Day Before developers did have the rights to the Day Before name. They were going to launch it in December, and they finally showed some gameplay footage that actually looked pretty decent. It looked a lot better than I think a lot of people expected, and it was the final straw for getting people's hopes up and really looking forward to this game and what it might have to offer. Yes, there was still reason to be skeptical. I think anyone who watched the footage of the gameplay still was unsure about how good the game would actually be, but there was enough there to tell you that, okay, maybe there's an actual game. After it launched into early access, though, it was clear a lot of the footage from the gameplay trailer was specifically designed for that, and there were a lot of missing features. There were a ton of bugs. The game was incredibly poorly reviewed, and overall it just felt like it was just not the game that was promised. It was more a survival extraction game than the open world MMO that everyone was looking for, which, if they had marketed it as a extraction type survival zombie game, that would be okay. But even still, there was no melee for zombies. It just felt completely empty, devoid of enough enemies or things to do. And the developers at Fantastic were not really being that open about what the situation was at that point. They were very combative leading up into launch. There was a lot of talk about them, it not being a scam, there not being issues that everyone saw were plain as day, and they talked about how hard they were working and everything like that. And I don't doubt that some developers did put in a lot of work for this video game, but it wasn't what was promised. It wasn't what was showcased. And after the developer closed merely 4 days after the early access launch, it's clear that this was pre-planned. There's no way that you can run out of funds that quickly if any type of planning had gone in this game. It's just impossible, right? You would have definitely had enough funding to keep it going for a month, whatever the case may be. 4 days is absolutely ludicrous. Not only that, but after the game gets shut down, essentially, after the developers get shut down, they scrub their socials of everything to do with the game. The developers on the Steam sites, they changed their name of all the previous games they had as well, so it looks like a new developer has headed those games, which is kind of crazy. There was a complete washing of everything. The CEO's Twitter is gone. The Twitter of the game developer is gone. It's just insane to think how they just kind of tried to disappear. And in the statement, they did claim that they were using the money they made to pay back their debts. But the game's only been out for a few days, so there's no way that they could have made that much money to pay back the debts. But also, how are you going to disappear with that money so quickly? It just doesn't make any sense. Luckily, the publisher, Steam, they've gotten together. It looks like there's going to be full refunds. It doesn't look like the developers are going to be, the developing company is going to make any money off this. They are going to be completely dissolved, and it's just been an absolute disaster. It's crazy to think how it all fell apart so quickly, and this had to have been the plan for quite some time. You cannot tell me in good faith that the Fantastic was ready to dissolve merely 4 days after launch, and that was not pre-planned. I just find it impossible to believe. So in the future, I think if something from a game studio sounds too good to be true, if there's a game that has this much hype, this much attention, and this much focus without any proof, any kind of history of development success, anything like that, then everyone just needs to take a step back, take a breath, and be a bit more cautious. If we don't see gameplay, if there's no track record from the developers, if we don't see the funding that goes into this, if we don't see the proof of concept in a way that really shows us how much they've developed this, because you can develop enough content, whether it's cinematics or gameplay for a trailer, but to flush out an entire game is an entirely different story, and the developers for the day before definitely did not do that, and it's a real shame because I, once again, feel like this game, a game in this genre, could absolutely bang, would be immensely popular, and it's unfortunate because this will have gamers looking at early access titles in the future, despite the early access success of a game like Baldur's Gate 3, and they'll just be that much more cautious, which is understandable because you don't want to spend $40 on a game that gets the rug pulled less than a week later. So, unfortunately, the sad saga of the day before is over. I'm sure there will be a lot more coming out, news from behind the scenes, all of the development problems that they had, probably even not paying developers. I know they were trying to get a lot of people in to help with the game for free, a lot of volunteer work, which is a massive red flag as well, among the other things that I mentioned. But anyway, that's going to do it for me. I hope you enjoyed the video. This will probably be the last coverage that I do of the day before. But let me know, did you ever have any faith for this game? Or did you think it was a lost cause from the jump? My name is Jopa. I hope you enjoyed the video. Subscribe, like the video, all that kind of good stuff. Have a good one, and I'll catch you all later.